Hello and welcome to my fourth game dev diary entry, detailing the development of Redacted Index over the past 2 weeks. This time, I haven't made as much progress as I would have liked, so the video will be a little bit shorter than usual. First, and most importantly, let's talk about the A5 procedural generation. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get this to work, and it's still very much not there yet. A lot of the issues seem to stem from the placement of blocks, causing weird recasting and alignment issues. To try and correct some of these, I've had to repeatedly adjust all the placements and change the whole prefab setup quite a few times, a very similar issue to the reason why I remade A1. So, at this point I'm reconsidering also making the corridor asset and just adjusting the scripts to compensate instead. It might save me a decent amount of time, but with the deadline marching closer, running out of buffer time to make emergency changes is also a very scary prospect. I have managed to get it at least roughly working though, with the rooms being generated semi-randomly, and parts of mechanics seen in the game this mechanic is based off of, Can't Escape Purgatory, are at least somewhat visible. One fun mechanic which I got working, and then later broke, is what I call the staring corridor effect, where a player shouldn't be able to watch the corridor be changed or destroyed, but the second the player isn't looking, the corridor behind them might shift into something else, disorientating the player. Annoyingly, whenever I add a mechanic or a system to fix a bug, it just breaks another thing instead. Which tells me I need to relook exactly what I want the corridors to do, because it seems like I have conflicting thoughts on how each mechanic should interact with the others. This is even more annoying, because I've made this whole thing before, and more, but it seems with all the extra things I'm trying to add on top of it, it just makes it more complicated. After working on the A5 stuff for a while, I decided I needed to work on something else that actually makes some progress. So, I decided to finally begin the development of the enemies. As a starter, I decided to go with the simplest type, the camper enemy in the side rooms of A1. This enemy will, in effect, guard the side rooms until the player figures out how the stealth mechanics work in this game. It's going to be a relatively weak enemy, as it serves both as a tutorial, and it's also found very early on in the game. The AI logic revolves around a state machine, which depends on the stealth system for the player, which I'm implementing simultaneously. I've only worked on the size system for the enemies so far, but this game will also feature a sound mechanic, where certain actions, such as the player sprinting, will increase the range that the enemies can detect the player from. The site, at the moment, works by drawing a raycast between the player or tool and the enemy that's checking, and seeing if there's an object in the way, ignoring triggers. It then compares the angle and distance between the enemy's forward and the position of the given target, making sure to prioritize the tool if possible. That said, I also made sure the player can't just throw the tool whilst being chased to easily escape once caught. One detail I should mention, and that the player will find quite early on, is that the tool is just as vulnerable as the player is to the enemies. So, an enemy catching the tool when the player throws it is a game over as well. I've recently been playing Northern Journey, a weird first-person shooter game, and have seen an interesting idea which I think could work well in my game. It triggers when the game recognizes that the player is using the side of their screen to look at an object, and in this game's case it causes this NPC to play a random animation. I don't think I'll be using it exactly the same way, but I think it could be a fun way to hide content or interact with enemies, but I've yet to figure out exactly what I want to use it for. It'd probably be a hidden mechanic, but I'll leave it as a nice feature to add in the future, as I'm still concerned about the rate of progress I'm making. As I mentioned, this entry is quite short, and that's really all I have to show off this time. Next time I'll be prioritizing linking up all this stuff into one more cohesive bundle, but depending on the speed I work at, I may also work on some note placement, some asset generation, enemies, level design, and possibly even some audio stuff. Thanks for watching.